It wasn't my car they broke in that crash, not even my body. It was my marriage.
The airbag hit my face like a freight train, and through the chemical smoke and ringing in my ears, I knew my marriage was about to end. Rain hammered the windshield of my overturned Ford as I fumbled for my phone. Red fluid trickled from my nose, but I was alive. The idiot in the pickup had blown through the stop sign like it was a suggestion, sending me spinning into the ditch on Route 47. My ribs screamed when I breathed, but nothing felt broken. Jack? What's wrong? Holly's voice came through crystal clear, like she was sitting next to me instead of wherever the hell she actually was. Car accident. I'm okay, but I need you to pick me up from County General. Ambulance is here now. Silence stretched between us. I could hear restaurant noise in the background, clinking glasses, muffled conversations, the kind of ambient sound that comes from somewhere nice. I'm at lunch with Evan, she said finally. We're right in the middle of... Holly, I need you. Another pause. Longer this time. The paramedic was tapping on my passenger window, and I held up one finger. I really can't just leave, Jack. We ordered and everything. Can you call someone else? The words hit harder than the airbag. 22 years of marriage, and she couldn't leave her lunch with Evan Shore to pick up her husband from the emergency room. Evan, her so-called best friend since college. Evan, who'd been around more and more lately. Okay, I said. That was it. Just okay. Because what else do you say when you realize your wife has been lying to you for God knows how long, and she's just confirmed it by choosing another man over your potential passing? I'll figure something out, I added, watching the paramedic's concerned expression through the rain-streaked glass. Thank you for understanding, baby. I love you, baby. She called me baby while abandoning me on the side of the road for her lunch date. Love you too, I lied. The emergency room smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. 3 bruised ribs, minor whiplash, nothing that wouldn't heal. But something else had broken in that ditch, something that might never mend. I sat on the examination table, still in my work clothes, dusty jeans and a company polo that read Marlowe Safety Inspections. 20 years of keeping construction workers alive, making sure buildings didn't fall down, bridges didn't collapse. Funny how I'd missed the structural damage in my own house. My phone buzzed with a text from Danny, my foreman. Site report done. Hope you're okay, boss. I typed back, handle tomorrow's inspection at the Monroe Project. I'll be out. Then I dialed the non-emergency police line. County Sheriff, this is Dispatcher Williams. This is Jack Marlowe. I need to speak with an officer about delivering a message. What kind of message, sir? My wife is at Harbor Grill on Main Street. She's having lunch with a man named Evan Shore. I need an officer to find her and tell her something important. Is this an emergency? In a way, yes. 20 minutes later, Officer Perez called me back. I can swing by there, mister. Marlowe, what do you want me to tell your wife? I stared at the hospital discharge papers in my hand. The doctor had warned me about delayed shock, how trauma could make you do things you wouldn't normally do. Maybe this was one of those things. Maybe not. Tell her I'm alive, I said. And tell her I know. Know what, sir? She'll understand. Holly laughed at something Evan said, wine making her cheeks flush pink in the way I used to love. They sat across from each other at Harbor Grill's corner table, the one with the good view of the marina. She'd worn her blue dress, the one she claimed was at the dry cleaner when I'd suggested dinner out last week. Officer Perez walked through the front door at exactly 2:47 p.m., his uniform drawing glances from other diners. He approached their table with the measured stride of someone delivering bad news. Holly's laugh died in her throat when she saw him. Evan's wine glass froze halfway to his lips. Perez leaned down, said something quiet. Holly's face went white as fresh paint. Evan set his glass down with shaking hands, wine sloshing over the rim. The officer straightened up, tipped his hat politely, and walked away without answering their desperate questions. Holly grabbed Evan's arm across the table, her mouth moving rapidly. Evan fumbled for his wallet, hands trembling as he tried to flag down their server. From my borrowed spot in Danny's pickup truck across the street, I watched my wife's world begin to crumble. 22 years, and it all came down to a choice at a restaurant table. She'd made her choice. Now I was making mine. Danny's truck smelled like cigarettes and sawdust, familiar scents that reminded me of job sites and honest work. The doctor had cleared me to drive, though my ribs protested every turn of the steering wheel. Harbor Grill's parking lot came into view, and I slowed down. Holly stood by her car, pacing in tight circles while talking rapidly on her phone. Evan leaned against his BMW, his own phone pressed to his ear. They weren't talking to each other anymore. Good. I could have stopped, could have pulled into the lot and demanded answers, but I'd learned something important in that hospital bed. Sometimes silence cuts deeper than screaming. Instead, I drove past slowly, making sure she saw me. Our eyes met through her car window. She raised her hand, started to wave, then seemed to remember where she was and who she'd chosen over me. Her hand fell back to her side. In the glove compartment, Holly's backup phone sat like a time bomb. She'd forgotten it that morning when she rushed out to meet her personal trainer, or so she'd claimed. I'd grabbed it on impulse, thinking she might need it. Now I understood why fate had put it in my hands. 22 years of marriage, and I'd never looked through her phone. Trust, she'd always said, was the foundation of everything. She was right about that, but trust, once broken, could become something else entirely. Our house felt different when I walked through the front door. Same furniture, same photos on the walls, same everything. But it was like looking at a movie set after the camera stopped rolling. All the magic gone, just props and pretense left behind. Holly's backup phone powered up with a cheerful chime. No password, because why would there be? We trusted each other. The message thread with Evan Shore went back 18 months. 18 months of "Good morning, handsome," and "Wish you were here," and "Can't wait to see you again." 18 months of planning lunches and afternoon meetings and weekend work conferences that I now realized had nothing to do with work. My hands shook as I scrolled through months of my wife's secret life. Restaurant photos where she looked happy in ways I hadn't seen in years. Complaints about me being boring, predictable, too focused on work. Plans that lined up perfectly with her yoga classes and girls' nights and volunteer work at the animal shelter. The most recent exchange made my stomach turn. Evan. Looking forward to lunch tomorrow. Harbor Grill at 2. Holly. Perfect. Jack will be on site all afternoon. He'll never know. Evan. He never does. Holly. That's what makes this so easy. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. last night, while I was asleep next to her. I was scrolling through more messages when I heard the garage door rumble open. Holly was home from her disaster lunch, probably to check on her injured husband and figure out what the hell Officer Perez had meant. I slipped the phone into my work jacket and went to greet my wife. Holly moved around our kitchen like she was defusing a bomb, every gesture careful and deliberate. She'd changed out of the blue dress into jeans and a sweater, trying to look casual, domestic, innocent. "How are you feeling?" she asked, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. I was so worried when the officer found me. "I'm fine, just sore." She started browning ground beef for spaghetti, her back to me. It was strange how he knew where to find me. "I never told you I was going to Harbor Grill." I sat at our kitchen table and watched her perform the role of concerned wife. 22 years, and she'd gotten good at acting. "How was lunch?" I asked. "Oh, you know. Same old Evan complaining about his marriage and work." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "He sends his regards, by the way. Hopes you're feeling better." "That's nice of him." Dinner conversation limped along like a three-legged dog. Holly talked about her day, carefully editing out the parts that mattered. I made appropriate responses while watching her performance. Finally, over our second glass of wine, I decided to test the waters. Perez said you looked surprised to see him. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth, a piece of pasta dangling from the tines like a confession. Well, yes. You don't expect to see police officers when you're having lunch. He said you asked how he'd found you. Did I? She set down her fork carefully. I don't remember that. I sent him, I said quietly. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Holly's wine glass sat untouched, her meal growing cold. Outside, our neighbor's dog barked once, sharp and accusatory. You sent him to find me? I needed my wife, Holly. I was hurt and alone, and I needed you. When you chose lunch over me, I had to find another way. Jack, It's okay, I said, standing up to clear my plate. I understand now. She didn't ask what I understood. Maybe she already knew. The county sheriff's station occupied a squat brick building that had seen better decades. Officer Perez looked up from his paperwork when I walked into the bullpen, his expression shifting from professional courtesy to something warmer. Mr. Marlowe, how are those ribs? Healing. I wanted to thank you for yesterday. Just doing my job. About that, I said, settling into the chair beside his desk. Did anyone log my request for the message delivery? Perez leaned back in his chair, studying me with cop eyes that had probably seen every human motivation at least twice. Officially? Number. We call that a courtesy. He paused, then added, Unofficially, it sounds like you're asking for a reason. My wife might have some questions about the timeline, about how you found her so quickly. Understanding flickered across his face. Well, Mr. Marlowe, I responded to a concerned husband's request to check on his wife's welfare after a medical emergency. The fact that she was exactly where you said she'd be was just good police work. And if anyone asks about the timing, I'd say I received the call around 2:30 and arrived at Harbor Grill approximately 15 minutes later. Standard response time for a non-emergency welfare check. I stood up and shook his hand. I appreciate your professionalism, Officer Perez. Give my regards to your wife, he said with the faintest smile. Outside in the parking lot, I sat in my truck and realized I'd just learned something valuable about leverage. Sometimes the truth was a weapon you didn't have to fire. You just had to let people know you were carrying it. Shore Financial Planning occupied the third floor of a glass building downtown, all modern furniture and inspirational posters about wealth management. Evan's corner office had a view of the river and a mahogany desk that probably cost more than most people made in a month. He looked up when I knocked on his open door, his expression cycling through surprise, guilt, and something that might have been fear. Jack, how are you feeling? Holly told me about the accident. I'm sure she did. I walked into his office and closed the door behind me. Evan's eyes tracked the movement like a trapped animal watching the cage door swing shut. What can I do for you? Instead of answering, I pulled Holly's backup phone from my jacket pocket and set it gently on his expensive desk. The screen was dark, but we both knew what was inside. Evan stared at the phone like it might explode. I have everything I need, I said quietly. Jack, listen. No. I held up my hand. We're not going to have that conversation. You're not going to explain or justify or apologize. You're just going to sit there and understand that your fun is over. Evan's face had gone pale, his hands flat on his desk like he was trying to keep them from shaking. What do you want? I don't want anything from you, Evan. You've already given me everything I need. I turned to leave, then paused at his door. By the way, how's Melissa? Still think you're at the gym 3 nights a week? The door clicked shut behind me with the finality of a coffin lid. The locksmith finished installing the new deadbolts at 3:47 p.m., while Holly was at her book club that might or might not actually exist. $300 for new locks, but some things were worth the investment. I took a photo of the front door's shiny new hardware and texted it to Holly, along with a simple message. Stay with Evan tonight. My phone rang within minutes. Jack, what the hell is this? New locks for security. You changed the locks on our house? My house, Holly. Check the deed. This is insane. I'm coming home right now. The locks won't recognize your key anymore. You can't do this. I live there. I held the phone away from my ear as her voice rose to a shriek. Several book club members would be getting quite an education today. Actually, I can. Consult a lawyer if you disagree. Jack, please. Can we just talk about this? We did talk. Yesterday at dinner. Today I'm acting. I don't understand what's happening. Yes, you do. I ended the call and immediately started recording software on my phone. She called back 47 seconds later, crying and begging and making all the right noises. I let it go to voicemail, then forwarded the recording to the family law attorney I'd found online that morning. Sometimes evidence collected itself. Margaret Walsh had been practicing family law for 30 years, and her office walls displayed the battle scars, framed settlements, custody agreements, and what looked like a few scalps. She listened to my story with the detached professionalism of someone who'd heard every variation of human betrayal. The phone records will be crucial, she said, making notes on a yellow legal pad. 18 months of documented infidelity should be sufficient for fault-based divorce in this state. What about custody? Your children are how old? 16 and 14. Emma and Tyler. Old enough to have opinions about where they want to live. Combined with documented abandonment, her refusal to come to the hospital, and marital misconduct, I'd say you have a strong position. She handed me a stack of papers. I'll file for legal separation first, citing abandonment and infidelity. That establishes your right to exclusive occupancy of the marital home and temporary custody. She'll have to respond within 30 days. How long will this take? Depends on how much of a fight she wants to make. But Jack? She looked at me over her reading glasses. Based on what you've told me, I don't think she's in a position to fight very hard. I was signing the final papers when Margaret's assistant knocked on the door. Mrs. Walsh? There's someone here about the Shore case. Says she got your card in her mailbox? Margaret and I looked at each other. Send her in, Margaret said. Melissa Shore was nothing like I'd expected. Holly had mentioned Evan's wife in passing over the years. Boring, focused on the kids, never wanted to do anything fun. The woman who walked into Margaret's office was sharp-eyed and elegant, carrying herself like someone who'd been underestimated before and learned to use it as a weapon. Mr. Marlowe, she said, shaking my hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. I believe we have something to discuss. Margaret gestured to the chairs across from her desk. Mrs. Sure, you mentioned getting my card? Someone left it in my mailbox yesterday with a note that said I might need it. They were right. She opened her purse and pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. 2 years of credit card statements showing charges at restaurants and hotels I've never been to. Phone records. Photos. She slid several pictures across Margaret's desk. Harbor Grill featured prominently, but there were others. My wife and her husband at a downtown hotel, walking hand in hand through a park, kissing in the parking lot of some restaurant I didn't recognize. How long have you known? I asked. Suspected for months. Confirmed yesterday when your wife called our house looking for Evan after some incident with a police officer. She was crying, panicked, saying something about everything falling apart. Melissa's smile was sharp as a scalpel. Evan tried to convince me it was about a business deal, but men are terrible liars when they're scared. Margaret was studying the photos with professional interest. These are dated? Everyone. I had a private investigator following them for 6 weeks. She looked at me with something like respect. Though I wish I'd known about the phone records. That would have saved me $3,000. I can share everything I have, I said. Good. Because I want to coordinate our approach, file simultaneously, share all evidence, make sure they can't construct competing narratives. Margaret leaned back in her chair, looking like Christmas morning had come early. This is going to be interesting, she said. Harbor Grill buzzed with the usual Friday afternoon crowd, business lunches winding down, early happy hour drinkers settling in for the weekend. Holly sat at the same corner table where her world had started falling apart 3 days ago, papers spread in front of her like tarot cards predicting disaster. The process server was a professional, approaching her table with the measured pace of someone who'd done this dance 1,000 times. He spoke briefly, handed her the envelope, and walked away while she stared at the legal documents like they were written in a foreign language. From my truck across the street, I watched her read through the separation papers. Her free hand pressed against her mouth, muffling what looked like a sob. The other diners gave her space, the way people do when they sense private tragedy unfolding. Evan arrived 10 minutes later, probably summoned by a panicked phone call. He slid into the chair across from her and immediately started gesturing, his lawyer's training kicking in as he tried to manage the crisis. That's when the second process server appeared. This one approached Evan with the same professional courtesy, handed him his own envelope, and departed while Evan tore it open with shaking fingers. Melissa had timed it perfectly. I started my truck and drove past slowly, making sure to catch Holly's eyes through the restaurant window. She looked up from her papers and saw me, her expression cycling through recognition, pain, and something that might have been the first stirring of real fear. I didn't wave, didn't nod, just drove past like she was a stranger, which she was becoming more every day. In my rearview mirror, I saw her stand up suddenly, knocking over her water glass. Evan grabbed her arm, trying to pull her back into her seat, but Holly shook him off and ran toward the parking lot, probably hoping to catch me. I turned the corner and disappeared, leaving them both sitting in the wreckage of their secret romance, drowning in legal papers and the dawning realization that their fun had finally come due. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and failed dreams. Holly sat at the defendant's table wearing a conservative Navy suit I'd never seen before, probably bought specifically for this moment. Her lawyer, some public defender type she'd found at the last minute, kept shuffling papers and whispering urgent instructions she didn't seem to hear. Across the aisle, I sat with Margaret, our evidence organized in neat folders that represented 2 years of lies and 18 months of documented infidelity. The phone records, the photos, the credit card statements, the recording of Holly's breakdown when I changed the locks, all of it laid out like a roadmap of betrayal. Judge Patterson was 70 if he was a day, with the weathered expression of someone who'd seen every variety of human failure parade through his courtroom. He reviewed our filing with the thorough attention of a man who understood that families lived or died on his decisions. "Mr. Marlowe," he said finally, "you're seeking full custody of the minor children and exclusive occupancy of the marital residence based on allegations of infidelity and abandonment." "Yes, Your Honor." "Mrs. Marlowe, how do you respond to these allegations?" Holly's lawyer stood up, but she waved him back down and rose herself. "I made mistakes, Your Honor. But I never abandoned my children. I love them." "The evidence suggests otherwise," Judge Patterson said mildly. He held up a transcript of the hospital phone call. "When your husband was injured in a car accident and requested your assistance, you refused because you were having lunch with another man. Is this accurate? I didn't know how badly he was hurt. But you knew he was hurt enough to be transported to a hospital by ambulance." Holly's composure cracked like ice under pressure. "I was confused, scared. I made a bad decision." Margaret stood up. "Your Honor, we'd like to present additional evidence of Mrs. Marlowe's decision-making process. The phone messages appeared on the courtroom's projection screen, 18 months of infidelity displayed in neat text threads. Holly's face went white as her own words condemned her from beyond the grave of deleted conversations. "He'll never know," Judge Patterson read aloud. "That's what makes this so easy." He looked up at Holly with the expression of someone who'd just watched a defendant convict themselves. "Mrs. Marlowe, is this your phone number?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And these are your messages to Mr. Evan Shore?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Including plans to meet him at various hotels and restaurants while your husband believed you were at work or volunteer activities?" Holly nodded, no longer trusting her voice. Judge Patterson set down the transcript and looked at both lawyers. "I'm granting Mr. Marlowe's petition for legal separation, full custody of the minor children, exclusive occupancy of the marital home, and spousal support obligations will be determined at final hearing." He banged his gavel once. "This case will be reviewed in 90 days. Court dismissed." Holly's lawyer helped her gather her papers with the gentle efficiency of someone attending a funeral. At the defendant's table, she looked small and broken. Nothing like the confident woman who'd chosen lunch over her husband's emergency just a week ago. I stood up and walked toward the exit without looking back. Behind me, I heard her start to cry. The courthouse steps were crowded with other people's tragedies: divorce hearings, custody battles, child support enforcement, normal human wreckage on a Tuesday morning in suburbia. Melissa Shore waited by her car, wearing a satisfied expression and a business suit that probably cost more than Holly made in a month. Her own hearing had gone just as well, Evan's infidelity documented in excruciating detail, and his financial assets frozen pending final settlement. "How do you feel?" she asked as I approached. "Like I just woke up from a long dream. Good dream or nightmare? I'm not sure yet." Across the street, Holly and Evan stood together on the sidewalk, but not touching. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs while he stared at his phone, probably calculating how much this was going to cost him. They looked like strangers who'd met at a bus stop and discovered they were going to the same terrible destination. Melissa followed my gaze. "Hard to believe they thought they could keep it secret forever." People believe what they want to believe. And now they get to live with the consequences. A familiar police cruiser drove slowly past the courthouse. Officer Perez was behind the wheel, and he tipped his hat slightly when he saw me. I raised my hand in acknowledgement. "Friend of yours?" Melissa asked. "Someone who helped me understand that the truth doesn't always set you free," I said. "Sometimes it just changes the nature of your prison." Melissa laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the afternoon air like broken glass. "I like you, Jack Marlowe. If you ever get tired of being married, give me a call." She drove away in her BMW, leaving me standing on the courthouse steps, watching the wreckage of 2 marriages blow away in the autumn wind. Our house felt different when I unlocked the front door. Not empty exactly, but lighter somehow, like a fever had finally broken. The kids were at school, the locks were changed, and Holly's things were boxed up in the garage waiting for her to arrange pickup. I walked through rooms that were slowly becoming mine again. Her books were gone from the shelves, her photos removed from the walls, her presence gradually erased like pencil marks on paper. In the kitchen, I pulled out the spray bottle and paper towels and began cleaning the dining room table where we'd eaten our last meal together. No more wine glasses reflecting lies, no more forced conversation over cold pasta, no more pretending that everything was fine when it had been dying for 18 months. The table gleamed under the overhead light, clean and empty and honest for the first time in too long. Emma and Tyler would be home from school soon, full of questions about the divorce and the custody hearing and why their mother was suddenly living in an apartment across town. They'd adjust, the way kids always did. Probably better than their parents, if I was being honest. I sat down at the clean table and pulled out my phone. Holly's contact information was still there, 22 years of shared history reduced to a name and a number. My finger hovered over the delete button. Outside, Mrs. Patterson was walking her dog past our front yard, the same route she'd taken every afternoon for the past decade. Some routines survived catastrophe, others didn't. I pressed delete and watched Holly's name disappear from my phone like she'd never existed at all. The garage smelled like motor oil and sawdust, familiar scents that reminded me of better times when the biggest problems in my life involved making sure buildings didn't fall down. Holly's backup phone sat on my workbench where I'd placed it after the custody hearing, its screen dark and lifeless. 22 years of marriage, and it all came down to a device smaller than a paperback book. All those messages, all those lies, all those secret plans that she'd thought were safely hidden from her boring, predictable husband who never paid attention to anything but work. She'd been right about me being predictable, just not in the way she'd thought. I picked up the phone and walked to the garbage bin by the overhead door. For a moment, I stood there holding it, remembering the shock of reading those first messages, the sick feeling in my stomach when I realized how long she'd been lying to me, the cold fury that had driven everything since. But that was over now. The phone had served its purpose, delivered its evidence, destroyed 2 marriages, and rebuilt 1 life from the ashes. Now it was just electronic waste, a piece of obsolete technology that had outlived its usefulness. I dropped it into the garbage bin where it landed with a soft thunk against the other detritus of my former life. Holly's old magazines, photos from happier times, the accumulated trash of a relationship that had died so slowly I hadn't noticed until it started to smell. The lid closed with a decisive click, sealing away the last evidence of who we used to be. Through the garage window, I could see Officer Perez driving his evening patrol down our street, maintaining the peace in our quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing interesting ever happened. He slowed slightly as he passed our house, nodded once, and continued on his rounds. In the kitchen, Emma was starting her homework at the clean dining room table while Tyler heated up leftover pizza in the microwave. Normal family life, the kind I'd forgotten was possible when every conversation was mined with hidden meanings and every meal was seasoned with suspicion. I stood in the garage for another moment, listening to my children's voices through the connecting door. They were laughing about something that had happened at school, the easy laughter of people who trusted each other. Trust. Holly had been right about that being the foundation of everything. She just hadn't understood that once you broke it, you couldn't unbreak it. You could only clear away the rubble and build something new on whatever solid ground remained. I turned off the garage lights and went inside to have dinner with my kids at our clean table, closing the door behind me on the darkness where Holly's secrets went to die.